16 cars that showed muscle was alive in the 70s. The golden age of American muscle peaked in 1970, with cars like the 450 bhp Chevelle LS6 marking the height of power before emissions laws toned things down. However, the 1974 Camaro Z/28 with 245 net horsepower proves that muscle cars still had plenty of punch in the 70s. 1. 1971 Chevrolet Chevelle 454 LS5. Since the 70s Chevelle represented muscle's power peak, let's start with what happened to it the following year. A need to accept low-lead fuel meant most muscle cars that survived into 1971 had to run with lower compression ratios, and the Chevelle was no different. The 450 bhp LS6 was no more, meaning the most powerful version was its LS5 little brother, which thanks to new heads and a revised cam, actually gained 5 bhp for a 365 bhp total, despite its lower compression. 2. 1971 Dodge Challenger Hemi. Arguably the most iconic engine of the entire muscle era, Chrysler's 426 Hemi was officially rated at 425 horsepower. 25 horsepower down on Chevy's LS6, though many fans believe it was actually the more powerful of the two. What matters here is that only the Hemi made it to the 1971 model year, when it could be ordered in cars like the Dodge Charger and Challenger, and Plymouth Cuda, Roadrunner, and GTX. Chrysler actually quoted two Hemi power figures for 1971. The familiar 425 brake horsepower SAE gross figure, and also a 350 brake horsepower rating measured using the more realistic SAE net system that would become standard from 1972. 3. 1972 Oldsmobile 442. When Oldsmobile released the first 442 in 1964, the name had stood for a 4-speed manual transmission, 4-barrel carb, and dual exhausts, underlining its performance credentials. But by 1972, the standard engine was a weedy 350 cubic-inch V8 with just 160 brake horsepower that could be mated to a 3-speed automatic. 4. 1973 Ford Mustang 351-4 VQ code. The glory days of the Boss 302, Boss 429, and big block Cobra jet motors might have gone by 73, but the Mustang menu did still contain the odd, tasty morsel. The hottest engine was a rare 351 cubic-inch, 5.8-liter, Q-code small block that produced 266 brake horsepower, a solid 21 brake horsepower more than the most powerful version of its Chevrolet Camaro rival. 5. 1974 AMC Javelin 401. The swoopy Javelin is often forgotten when talk turns to the Ford Mustang and its rivals, but by 1974, the Javelin was the only one still flying a flag for performance. The 1974 Javelin's 235 bhp 401 cubic inches 6.6-liter V8 had lost 20 bhp compared to the previous year's car, but you couldn't even get a V8 in the new 474 Ford Mustang Thauv, så tog de enfant for toys. 6. 1974 Buick Grand Sport. The Buick Grand Sport was a Pontiac GTO with a cravat. Big on power, but big on luxury too. Actually, not so big on power this year. The base engine for 74 was a 175 bhp 350 cubic-inch 5.7-liter V8. But go-fast fans could still order a big block V8 in either 190 bhp standard form or 230 bhp Stage 1 guise. 7. 1974 Chevrolet Corvette 454. The most obvious change to the 74 Corvette was a new smooth body-colored rear bumper to match the similar bumper the front end had gained the year before. But of more significance to performance fans was that this was your last chance to buy a big block engine in a Corvette. The 454 cubic inch 7.4-liter V8 produced 270 brake horsepower compared with just 195 brake horsepower for the entry-level 5.7-liter L48. 8. 1974 Plymouth Roadrunner 440. Sadly for Dodge and Plymouth fans, the Chrysler 426, Hemi, and triple-carb 446 pack V8s were long gone by 1974. But with the little-known 275 brake horsepower, 440 cubic inch 7.2-liter V8 under its bonnet, a well-optioned Roadrunner could still justify its name. 9. 1974 Pontiac Trans Am Super Duty. Pontiac bucked the trend for dwindling power outputs with the 1973 to 1974 Trans Am's optional Super Duty package. While the base 450 cubic inch made do with 250 horsepower, the Super Duty delivered a mighty 310 horsepower, or at least until a softer cam profile dropped it back to 290 horsepower shortly after launch. Even so, no mainstream U.S.-built production car would make more power or go faster for over a decade. 10. 1974 Pontiac GTO. But what Pontiac giveth with one hand, it taketh away with the other. Also in 1974, the once great GTO reverted to an option pack on the Ventura, Pontiac's version of the Chevy Nova. It did at least use a Pontiac engine, though sadly not a 455. Instead, it made do with a 350 cubic inch good for 200 brake horsepower. 77 to 60 miles per hour wasn't awful in the context of the times, and it shifted twice as many units as the previous year's GTO. But that wasn't enough to stop it becoming the last GTO for 30 years. 11. 1976 Ford Gran Torino. This list has been short on Ford content so far, for the simple reason that Ford virtually walked away from the performance market after 1972. But while you couldn't order a big block Mustang or Cougar past 1971, you could still get one in a Gran Torino. Power from the mammoth 460 cubic inch V8 was down to 202 brake horsepower for 1976, the Torino's last year. But anything starting with a 2 was worth shouting about in those days. And besides, the reflected glory of a regular spot on TV's Starsky and Hutch was probably worth another 100 ponies. 12. 1976 Dodge Dart 360. A real stealthy performer, the Dodge Dart Sport 360 proved that muscle was alive and flexing in mid-1970s Detroit. The 5.9-liter V8 had lost 25 bhp since its introduction 2 years earlier, but according to a 1976 car and driver test that clocked it at 122 mph, it was the fastest American-built car that wasn't a Corvette. 13. 1977 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. Chevy actually killed the performance-focused Z28 off at the end of the 1974 model year, steering the Camaro in a more luxury direction. But by 1977, it was back. Ultimate power was never the Z28's forte, which is just as well, because this smog-friendly one only mustered 185 bhp. 0 to 60 mph required 8.6 secs, but unlike most vintage muscle cars, this one could at least do corners. 14. 1970 Dodge Little Red Express. One of the most potent late 1970s Detroit muscle cars wasn't a car at all, but a truck. Exploiting the loophole that exempted trucks from power-sapping catalytic converters, the 1978 Little Red Express made 225 bhp from its 300 cu in V8, which exhaled through two functional vertical exhausts and could hurl it down the drag strip quarter-mile in 15.7 sx. 15. 1978. Ford Mustang II. King Cobra. Okay, cards on the table. If the King Cobra is muscle, it's one of those terrible fake six-pack tattoos. Visually, the Cobra desperately tried to ape its Trans Am rival, but when it came to performance, there was no contest. The Cobra's only engine option was a 134 bhp 5.0-liter V8 that struggled to get to 60 mph in 9 sx. 16. 1979 Pontiac Trans Am. The Trans Am might have been a pale shadow of its former self, but it did what no other rival managed, lasting right to the end of the decade. And though the big 455 had breathed its last in 1976, the Trans Am was still about the fastest American car you could buy this side of a Corvette. Base 79s used a 180 bhp Oldsmobile 403 V8, but the optional TA pack brought a proper Pontiac 400 V8 with 220 bhp that would take you to 60 mph in 6.7 secs. But this would be the last year for the big block V8. In 1980, it was replaced by a turbocharged small block V8, finally bringing the original age of the muscle car to a close.